Welcome to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge, a podcast for tech executives. We provide strategies and tactics to help executives succeed and further their career goals. With interviews from industry experts, leaders, and innovators, this show will surely get you on the edge of your seat with thought-provoking advice on how to stay ahead of the competition. Welcome to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge, a podcast exploring the latest trends, strategies, and insights in technology leadership. We will discuss the most important topics and ideas shaping the industry today. From emerging technologies to digital transformation and beyond, join us to learn all of the juicy secrets of tech leaders, their biggest successes and failures on our quest for gaining that all-important technology edge. So are you ready? Let's get started. Our guest today is David Kitchen, also known as Coach Kitch. Coach Kitch is the founder and president of Edge Leadership Academy. He is a former Division I coach and a PhD candidate with a master's degree in sports psychology, who has a decade of experience building leaders, culture, and mindset at the highest levels of sports and business. He's the author of The Pyramid, a system for building tomorrow's leaders today, and The Scorecard, a self-audit system to help you build the life you want. As a speaker, consultant, and coach, Coach Kitch is trusted by 100+ CEOs, coaches, and high performers to help them lead and win in business, athletics, and life. Welcome to the show.
Man, I'm fired up. Can't wait to do this. It's a Finish Friday attitude, so we get to have a little fun and have a good conversation this afternoon.
Yeah, well, let's hope we make it all the way through this time. We've tried once before, and you had a power outage, so let's hope it's through. So tell me, let's start with this. What are some of the lessons, how do some of the lessons learned in sports activities translate to life?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many parallels between life and business and athletics, right? And from my perspective, being a strength and conditioning coach, the number one thing that I always saw was just the carryover of being exposed to adversity, right? And the carryover of building resilience and commitment to a process. And so there's so many parallels now that we even talk about in our workshops and the things that you see in the business atmosphere and the business climate, especially when you look at the understanding that games aren't necessarily won on Saturdays, right? They're won on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the processes and the systems behind the scenes of what's going on. I mean, the final score that you see on a scoreboard is very rarely reflective, or it doesn't tell the whole picture, right? You always have to look. And so as a coach, we're looking at what are the things we did well? What are the things we didn't do well? And then more importantly, what's coachable and what's not coachable? And so I think that's very much so the way that we should be approaching things in business and in life, right? If we win in life and you go through things, how many people chalk things up to dumb luck, or it was a bad day, or it was this, or it was that? And I think really the key is to live in high definition like you would as a coach and look back at the processes that led to those outcomes. So whether it's you losing weight, your weight is up or down, whether it's a relationship going poorly or going well, you need to be exploring things in your life just like you would in sports and say, hey, what are the things here that are giving me these outputs? And then to take it just a step further, I mean, there's a statistic out there that like 95% of Fortune 500 CEOs are former student athletes. And so I think the ability to just manage your time and communicate and be where you're supposed to be responsible, right? I think all those things you learn in sports and they just translate into life. And then obviously the leadership skills that you learn are invaluable. And that's why those young men and young women go on to hold those types of positions.
Yeah, it's interesting. It came to mind when you were saying that I used to coach a roller hockey team, and it was an indoor roller hockey place. And one year I'm looking at the schedule and I'm like, wow, these three teams in the middle here are going to murder us if we're not, prepared. And so I started having them at the last 10 minutes of practice, we'd do ladders. And as you can imagine, 12-year-old kids, why are we doing ladders? Why are we doing ladders? Now, these were going to be at like a 10-game season. These are going to be like game 7, 8, and 9. And so kept doing this for weeks. Get to game 7, and it's like, just as I thought, we're losing 5-1 in the third period, but the other team is out of gas. But what does my team do? Right around them, they win 6-5. They won all 3 of those games the same exact way, having stamina. And so after the third game win, I said to them in the locker room, now you know why we do the ladders every single game. That other team was gassed, but you guys were right in there with them because you were conditioned. I think that it teaches kids, to me, my way of thinking, preparation. It teaches them teamwork. It teaches them having to wait for their turn. That's a big one. Like, why aren't I playing? It's not your turn yet. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to learn to wait. That's really interesting. So, like, what do you think, since we're talking about business, what do you think are like the three keys to peak performance for an executive?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's character. It's always going to start with your ability to lead yourself, right? Before you can lead anybody else and before you can perform at your peak, you have to know without a shadow of a doubt who you are and who you're not, right? And so I talk a lot about having a VMV statement or a vision, mission, and value statement. I think every high performer that I've been exposed to, every high performer that I work with now, it's the first thing that we do. We explore what is it that you want at the end of your life, beyond your business, beyond financials. What is the ultimate mountaintop for you? And then your mission is, how are you going to do that on a daily basis? Right. And then your values are the things that will protect you in the storm. And so if I had to break it down to three things, I think those will be the first three that I would start with. Is, do you have to have a vision, a mission, and a set of values? And then beyond that, it's habits and processes. It's your ability to build habits. And I say this a lot: high performers are not special people. They've just built a system in their life that reduces the likelihood of failure, meaning they've surrounded themselves with the right habits, the right environments, the right people, the right resources, the right knowledge and skills that make it really hard for them to fail. I mean, if you really break it down to its simplest terms, that's all it is. They know who they are, they know what they want, and then they surround themselves with things that are going to help them get there.
That's interesting. Like I got nicknamed Mr. Process because I'm always telling my clients about their need for having processes in business, but I also tell them they need those things in their life too. Because you made a great point there. Like business people, they always seem to understand that they have to have processes. I got to have an SOP for this and an SOP for that. Where are they in your life though? Like, what are you doing? Do you have a routine? I mean, I got to say, like, we just had a cat who needed surgery, and I know this is going to be like a weird analogy, but at the same time it does apply in my opinion. All the other animals in the house were weirded out when this cat was gone for 2 days at the hospital. Their routine was disrupted, and I think that's what people miss is, like, in my opinion, you have to have some kind of a routine. I know the whole morning routine thing is like overdone, but you have to have some kind of routine, and you don't necessarily have to like meditate and do all this stuff, but you probably should get up at the same time on a regular basis, and that should be followed by maybe some exercise. But you're going to do something and do the same thing every day, because I feel like it gets you into a flow state where now you're ready to work and your brain's primed and you're ready to go. So that's a really good point. I mean, you made the point about character. And I mean, of course, my definition of that is, who are you when no one's looking, right? Like, anyone can be a good person when all eyes are on them. But what do you do when you see $500 on the table and you could probably take it and no one would ever know? If you leave it there, you probably got good character.
Right.
It's an interesting thing. So, like, what do you think are the least effective methods that people try in order to reach peak performance?
I think doing too much. I think as high performers, like, if you're trying to be great at something, there's this temptation of shiny object syndrome, right? Where we're reading all the self-help books, we're reading all the self-improvement books, we're reading the productivity things, we're listening to podcasts, and we're doing all these things. We're trying to implement so many things into our life. And it goes back to what you said. There has to be a system and a process, even to the way that we implement new systems and processes. There has to be something in there. And so I think the number one thing that people fall into is doing too many things and doing nothing consistently, right? And so the reminder that I always give people is, it's great to seek out knowledge. It's great to seek out, new processes and things that you can implement in your life, but you have to understand, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if you don't know what is giving you the outputs in your life, then why are you doing it, right? So I tell people to go back to school. That's what I say. Go back to school. Because in school, you have 4-week blocks, 8-week blocks, 12-week blocks, whatever they are. You need to start implementing those things in your life. So if I'm going to read a new book, a book on a new management style or a new sales tactic, then I'm going to take that book. I'm going to do what I call the ICA framework, which is identify, conceptualize, and apply. So I'm going to identify all the key facts from the book. I'm going to start to conceptualize those things by asking questions like, what does this look like in my environment? What resources and skills would I need to be able to apply this? What are the positives and negatives of this? What is the desired outcome? How am I going to measure it? What metrics am I going to use? And then I'm going to apply the pieces that make sense for me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait that 4 to 12 weeks after I practice it in low stakes scenario, medium stakes scenario, high stakes scenarios. And then I'm gonna observe the trends. I'm gonna look at the metrics and say, okay, based on the metrics that I said I was going to use to measure this, is it working? Am I getting the positive results in my life? And then I'll decide whether I want to continue to implement this thing or stack something on top of it that's complementary, or maybe take something away underneath it, or maybe the foundation's not ready for that. And so I think that's one of the things that we run into. The other thing is just having a white belt mentality, right? And being able to look at things and be a lifelong learner. I think sometimes when you're so anxious to get somewhere and you're so goal oriented and you're so driven to pursue greatness in whatever form you're trying to pursue it in, it's easy for you to get caught up in skipping step 1 through 7 because they're boring and trying to go right to 8, 9, 10. And some of the self-help books that are out there write these great frameworks, and I love them, but they don't work for most people because most people don't have the basic discipline to do some of the things that you just talked about, which is get up at the same time, eat a somewhat decent diet 80% of the time. Most people aren't consistent in what they do anyways. So trying to learn these high level productivity and communication skills and all these different things makes no sense because you don't have step 1 and 2 down yet. So let's go back to that first. So I think having that white belt mentality and being able to go into things and say, hey, I need to be a lifelong learner. Let me get the basics really, really good at this. Let me get really, really good at the basics with this. And then let me move on to these higher level skills and things that I want to add on top of it.
It makes sense because like I know myself, over the years, I've tried to like improve my physique overall. And I tend to think that I'm 20 years younger than I actually am. First of all, that's one big problem, huge problem actually. And when I was younger, I liked to lift really heavy weights. Like I was deadlifting 600 pounds, that kind of stuff, which probably to a football guy isn't a whole lot, but for a guy whose biceps are like 17 inches, that's a lot of weight, and then as I got older, went through a divorce. I gained a lot of weight through all of that from the stress. And then I'm like, I have to get back into shape. And my new wife, she's a lot younger than me. She's like, you're going too hard. You're making me nervous. Like you're going to hurt yourself. You need to slow down. And of course, I can do it. I can do it. Well, and I actually back in December, I picked up the guitar again after like 20 years and I started working with it. And one of the things I did differently was I chose a single band for that month and I just played their music and learned all of their songs because, you have the same kind of technique that just keeps going through. Well, you perfect it and then it makes learning the next band even easier and the next band even easier. And instead of the progress being like kind of like this, the progress has been like this because I'm picking things up faster. So then I thought, all right, I've had a few health issues over the last year, but now it's time to like really be serious. And I decided I'm going to do a 12-week transformation type program, right? But I'm not going to go cuckoo crazy like I've been doing. I'm going to follow it exactly as written, and I'm not going to overdo it. And because consistency is the key, right? Like you have to be in the gym if it's gonna have the effect you want. Well, where I'm halfway through and haven't missed a single gym day, but also haven't hurt myself. That's, and I think you're right. I think most people, they try to do so much. Oh, I'm going to start my morning routine and it's going to include meditation, reading, journaling, exercise. And then every day they're trying to do like an hour of this, an hour of this. By the time they're done, their morning routine took them 4 hours. Way too much. So that's really good. That's really good advice. Let's talk about this lifelong learning. I personally, you can say I have a lot of books back here, and there's even more over that way. I'm really passionate about learning, and I usually have like 4 or 5 books going at a time. But what do you see is like the difference as far as performance between someone who has that kind of drive and motivation and someone who just doesn't care?
I think it's everything. To put it plainly, I think it's absolutely everything. I think your ability to consistently innovate and consistently build upon the skills that you have is the difference between being average and being great. I mean, there's that old quote, what got you crowned is what'll get you killed, right? And so whatever skills and things that you've learned that got you to a certain point, when you open new levels of your life, whether it's a new position, it's a new industry, whatever, you have to start all over. There's things that you can bring with you from that previous layer, but there's a lot of things that you're gonna have to build upon. And so if you don't have that lifelong learner mentality, you're just setting yourself up for trouble. I said on one of my first podcasts ever, and it kind of went a little bit viral. People caught on to it because I said, if there was somebody in the world who was the best in the world at blowing balloons, I would love to sit down with them for 30 minutes because they've mastered a skill, right? And so they have something figured out that I don't. And so I think your ability to consistently push yourself to learn new things and explore the rabbit holes and go explore the edges is the way that we say it a lot, and get into that stuff. And more importantly, I think it says a lot about your internal narrative and the way that you can view yourself and your character if you have the ability to read things that contradict your point of view, right? Because I think as a society, without getting too polarizing here, I think as a society we tend to put ourselves in echo chambers, right? If you get on social media, what are you going to follow? You're going to follow people that have the same views as you, the same interests as you. What are you most likely going to go watch? TV shows and media that agree with what you agree with. Why? Because you want to feel good. And so I think to actively and consciously seek out things that have an opposite point of view, I think says a lot about a person. So one of the little tests that I like to do is, like, if I read a book that comes from a certain standpoint and they mention in the book that something is contrary, I'll go read a book on that next, because it's like, I want to see both sides and then be able to form my opinion. I think that's the way that you maintain that lifelong mentality. So that lifelong learning mentality. So I think, it's getting out of your comfort zone. It's identifying that the things that got you here won't keep you here and won't get you to the top. And then it's being able to go against and challenge your own thoughts and beliefs. And I think that takes somebody that is really comfortable and strong in who they are and strong in their values. Like, you have to know who you are to be able to listen to somebody and listen to feedback and hear somebody say something that you disagree with without it affecting your inner judgment, right? Or the judgments that you have of yourself. You have to be able to do that. And if you ever want to be elite at something, man, you have to go listen to the best in the world at it and get around them. And they may say some things that hurt your feelings and don't agree, don't line up with what you previously believed. But that's what one of my favorite questions for high performers is: what's something you believe now that you didn't believe 6 months ago, or something
Yeah.
that you've changed your mind on?
That's huge when people are, because you're right, in society today, it is all about echo chamber and only sticking with the people who agree with you. And that's a huge mistake, because you need to see all sides. How do you know if your opinion is headed in the right direction if you don't bother to find out what the opposite opinion says? I remember when I was in high school, I played baseball. I was a pitcher, and our coach was really big on, when we were just freshmen, we would play scrimmage games against the varsity team. And it improved my pitching a great deal, because those were obviously better hitters. They were more mature, and you had to work harder to get them out. And even then, I played on the tennis team for a while, and he did the same thing. He'd put us with the younger players, would go with the older players who were varsity, and we'd play against them in practice. And you mentioned earlier about, like, when it's less impactful, a little more impactful, a little more impactful. I mean, to me, that's what that's about. Like, at practice, he could wipe the floor with me. It really doesn't matter, as long as I learn something from it. Then I can take that into the match that I actually have to win, and maybe have an edge, because I've been practicing against somebody who hits a lot harder, ball comes faster, my reaction time is better. But what do people like to do? They like to be that guy that's number one and mop the floor with everybody, because it's an ego thing, right? I think of, when I say that too, I think of somebody like Tom Brady. Not exactly, in my opinion, he's not my favorite individual in the world, but as far as a football player and a quarterback, especially, that guy, it's going to be a long time before someone touches him. And I think that what I read recently, I don't know if you know, but he bought a minority share of the Raiders,
Mhm.
and everyone was shocked because they had a home game and he was on the sideline walking up and down talking to the players and what. And I thought, why would you be shocked? This is Tom Brady. He's made it a lifetime of teaching other people around him how to be as good at the game as he is. And I think what separates him from everybody else is the mental, the mindset. He can put himself through hell, um, in order to compete. And so I'm not surprised that he walked up and down as an owner and talked to people, because that's what he knows best. So why would he change the process that's worked for him his entire career, right?
Right. And if you look at like one of my favorite clips, and it happens every year, and I just saw a montage of it. I forget who made the montage, but it was phenomenal. Every year, college football teams bring in guest speakers, and they bring in people to kind of, give some sort of talk during camp. And they could be, authors, they could be motivational speakers, they could be whoever. And Alabama is famous for this because they bring in the best of the best. They bring in Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant was there. Every year it's some really high level person to come in and share with them. And the beautiful part about it, and this was the montage that I saw, was it was an 8-year montage of Nick Saban sitting in the same seat in the front row at each of those presentations, taking notes. And that's the best. Nick Saban, you can't argue it. He's the best.
Right.
He's, if not the best, to ever coach the game. And he's there every year taking notes and listening and taking things in. And so I think that, to me, when you look at those people, the best leaders are learners, and so if you want to be great, you just got to keep learning.
Yeah, the whole area of sports, to me, it's one of the reasons why when you popped up on my calendar, I was very excited. I think sports and business, they go together. And it goes back to the original question, that I asked you. Like, I think that it develops habits that teach people how to operate in the real world in a way that will make them winners. And I mean, we can use that term, but what a win is going to be individual to each person, but you can use the term winner. And you got people like, you mentioned Nick Saban. Then there's like Pete Carroll. That guy. I have a friend who he went to jail because a woman accused him of rape in high school, and he had a full ride scholarship to USC and lost it all. Well, then when he came out, he was going to try to make basically he got her to admit that she lied. He got released early. And when he came out, he was going to try to make a comeback in the NFL. The only person who would give him a shot was Pete Carroll. And Pete told him that he gave him a shot because he remembered him from recruiting him in high school, and how what kind of like a learner he was, and how when Pete would talk, he would listen to what he was saying. And he said, "You're just a coachable person, and if anyone has a shot at this, you do." He didn't last. I mean, it's almost, I personally think it's next to impossible at like 26, 27 years old to break into the NFL after not having played football for God only knows how many years it was for him. But it's just an interesting story because great leaders are like that. They are willing to give people a shot because what's the harm? If he tries him out and it didn't work, what did he lose? A little bit of time? I mean, didn't lose anything. But what if it came out that he turned out to be a stellar player? Then he'd look like a genius. Oh my God, Pete Carroll picked this guy up when no one else would, right? Um, I think that sports is like, I wouldn't force my kids to do sports, but if they show an interest, encourage it, because there's so many lessons that are learned. My own son, he played baseball for a little while and he quit. You know why he quit? Because of the politics. I was shocked. At 10 years old, he told me, "Dad, you know what? All these parents, all they want is for their kid to go on the all-star team. They don't care if someone's better than their kid. They want to make sure their kid goes on the all-star team." And he used to go to a camp every season. And the guy that ran the camp was a former MLB player. And he told them, "Want to know how many all-star teams I was on? Zero." And he's like, "And I still played in the major leagues." So it stuck in his head. And I was proud of him for paying attention to that advice. But he literally quit baseball because the politics was, he's like, I will never get recognition because I'm not that flashy kid. I'm just the quiet one who just does my job. And he moved over to soccer, which, boy, I was like, huh, I know nothing about soccer. this is interesting, and I embraced it, and I've learned a lot through my kids, that I didn't
Yeah.
know before.
And I think there's so much value, kind of taking your story a step further with your son. Like there's so much value in one of the toughest lessons that you'll ever learn in sports, which is when you are good enough, or I'm sorry, when you're not good enough, and you have to hear that for the first time, right? Like and I think that's where a lot of parents go wrong now. And this is just kind of me on my, unsolicited TED talk on a stool here, right? But I know when I was in the college world, there were so many kids that had never heard that. They got to the college realm and they were like, my whole life I've been told how great I was. And now all of a sudden you're getting told, listen, you're not good enough to play right now. It doesn't mean you're not good enough to play ever. It doesn't mean anything about you as a human being. It just means your skill set right now is not good enough to get you on the field. And I think that is such a valuable lesson to be able to learn, because the reality is this: if you want to go out and start a business, there's a high likelihood that the market, not somebody, the market is going to tell you your product is not good enough, period. There's going to be times where you might go for a promotion, or you might go for a situation, an upgrade in your work situation. And your boss might say, hey, according to these metrics, you're just not good enough right now. And you have to be able to hear that. Like, and we know that now as adults, there's times in life where you try your best and you give it everything you have and you just come up short. And you have to be able to overcome that stuff over time. And so, yeah, any parents out there that are listening and have kids in sports, don't shelter them from that. Let them hear that, let them go through that, and let them grow through it.
That's an excellent point. I mean, I specifically recalled while you were saying that there's this young boy who I managed one of the teams, and we were at practice, and I was working on hitting. And so I had my assistants running, field drills, and then I would taking the kids aside and helping them with their swings. And this kid's mom was a former NCAA softball champion, and everything. But anyone that knows sports knows how you hit in softball is not how you hit in baseball. And so she comes up to me and she says, "You're ruining everything that I've taught him." Well, the kid was like undercutting the ball, and stuff like that. And I said, "Well, but that's not how you hit in baseball." And so she looked at me and she goes, "Well, who taught you that?" And I looked at her and I said, "Have you ever heard of Dusty Baker?" And she says, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I went to his hitting clinic. He taught me that." She went, "Good for her," right? Like, all right, I challenged him and he came back with an expert that knew more than me. So I'm going to shut up. But then there were the parents, "Well, I don't care who taught you that. This is wrong." And well, how do you know? Then why aren't you out here coaching? Like parents, you're right. Parents need to learn to be more honest with their kids about that kind of stuff. Like, not everybody's going to be a professional athlete. It's just not even possible. Like, there's not enough spots. So I say my always philosophy with my children was, don't step all over their dreams and aspirations, but be realistic with them about, like, if they ask you point blank, "How did I play today?" and they didn't play so great, it probably could have been a little better, and you kind of soften the blow a little bit, but you let them know, because you're right. If the first time they hear that is when they get to college and the coach looks at them and goes, you're going to sit on the bench. You're not good enough yet." And that's not everybody will add what you added either. It's for, you're not good enough now. You might be later, but right now you're not. Most of them just say, "You're just not good enough." And then the poor kid's left with, "I've never heard this before. I've always been the best." It's one of the things that happens. If anyone out there has ever coached a youth sports team and you get to that all-star season, that's where you see it, because every one of those kids has been the best on whatever team they're playing on. And they're not used to the competition from the other players. They're not used to having to sit on the bench ever. And let's be real. They're now baseball team. There's now 12 kids who are maybe 15 who are on a team. They've all been the best kids from the other team. So they've played every minute of every game. Think they're going to do that in this game? No. And they have to get used to that. Like, I think it's one of the things, we have an employee in our business that, like, she gets upset when things don't just happen for her right away. And I say, "Did you know how to do this before today?" "No." "Well, okay, it's going to take you some time, man, to get into this and learn it. Give yourself that time. Don't beat yourself up right now." But most businesses fail, right? Like, what is it? Something like 80% fail. And there's a reason for that. You have to be prepared for that. It could happen to you, right? So I think this is really interesting. So tell me a little bit about your Edge Leadership Academy. Like, what is it you guys are up to? You know, what kind of programs do you run? Let's hear
Mhm.
about that.
Yeah, so Edge came about during my last season in Division One. I had a young man who, in my opinion, was the best leader I've ever coached. Was also one of the most talented players I've ever coached. He's making a lot of money playing in sport now. But he came into my office and he said, "Coach, you know, my whole life I've been the best player on every team I've ever been on, and everybody's always telling me to lead, but nobody ever taught me how." And that really stuck in my head because I was like, man, if this young man doesn't feel prepared to lead and he's one of the best leaders that I've ever coached, then what does that say about everybody else? Right. And so I had a sports psychology background. And so I started digging into it more and more. And I was like, all right, there's a lack of actual curriculums out there to teach people how to be leaders. There's a lack of skills that are available to people that are actually being taught, not in a theory standpoint, but in an actual application standpoint, actual execution standpoint. And so I started doing it in the sports arena first. I started just teaching uh, leadership clinics, leadership workshops to local schools, started putting free stuff out on social media. Next thing I knew, I had college coaches reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, we know you have this experience in the college world. Why don't you come speak to our team?" And so ultimately I ended up walking away from a Division One coaching contract, launching the business full scale. And I started doing these workshops around the country, and we would do, eight workshops with a team. We did a captain's class during the pandemic. We did a win the weight course. I mean, we did a lot of different things. And during that time, I reconnected with an old friend of mine who had built a really successful career in sales and a career in business. And we're talking about it, about what I'm doing and everything. He's like, dude, you would kill it in business if you started doing this. Like, we need this in the corporate world. Like, we hear these things all the time. And so we sat down, we brainstormed, and we kind of morphed the curriculum that we were using in athletics to make it more applicable to business. In the meantime, I was going back to school to get my PhD in psychology. And so we started doing corporate workshops as well. So that was about 2 years ago. So now we're in year 3 of the business. Now our customer split is about 80% corporate, 20% athletics. But we have three major arms or three major legs basically of the business. So the first leg is our corporate clients, which is workshops, curriculums. We do keynote addresses. We do one-on-one coaching and mentoring, executive coaching, things like that. Pretty much anything that has to do with leadership, culture, or high performance, we're involved in on the corporate side. Our second leg is our athletic side, which is we still do our annual coaches academy. We do a summer campus tour where we go and do leadership workshops with programs around the country. Last year we were down at the University of Miami. The year before that we were with Northwestern men's basketball. So we get the opportunity to travel the country and do these pop-up events at different universities. And that's really fun. We also do a lot of coach the coaches, where we spend time with coaches and administrators and help them overhaul their culture. So if you're a coach and you say, "Hey, I want to do XYZ, we're a 1-11 program, I want us to be better, we're going to rebrand," they call us, we come in, we help them define what are the visions, what are the missions, what are the values of your program, how is that going to be operationalized. And then the third leg of the business is our individual work, which is growing substantially, where we do one-on-one coaching, where I offer one-on-one coaching. My business partner offers one-on-one coaching, and we do everything from sales and leadership and mindset to productivity. Pretty much all of that's a one-on-one mentorship environment. And then we also have a cohort style environment where we do a group mentorship that lasts 12 weeks, and we call that the table. So we say it's everybody wants a seat at it, everybody wants to bring something to it, right? So that's our table. And we get together with 15 people at a time, and we build these networking groups, and we go over. I do a personal presentation every week for about 30 minutes, and then we have 30 minutes of discussion, Q&A, and stuff like that. So that's what we're up to now. It's a little bit of everything. We kind of cross the gamut, but the number one thing that we try and do is just arm as many people as we can with the skills that it takes to be leaders and to live the life that they want to live.
That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun too.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I get to travel. I work with two of my best friends. It's phenomenal. And from the start, man, honestly, we were able to say, we don't have to take every client. Like, we're not for everybody. We know that. And we're very clear about it. And so we don't even call it sales within our organization. We call it recruiting. We treat it just like a college team where we want to work with people that want to work with us. And so we're very, very clear upfront with our clients of like, if you're just here to check a box, we are not your guys. If you want to sing kumbaya and not have any hard conversations about culture and leadership, we are not your guys. If you want to engage in the process, we're your guys. I'm here with you. If you want to go through the blood, the sweat, and the guts with me, let's do it. I'm your guy. But yeah, it's been an awesome experience, man. It's been 3 years running. We're growing extremely fast. It's if you would have told me 5 years ago or 4 years ago, even that this is where I would be now, I probably wouldn't believe you.
This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate everything you've told us today. And hopefully the audience is getting a lot out of it. I think they will. Why don't you let them know where they can find you on the internet if they want to reach out, maybe hire you?
We keep it super simple. So I'm at Coach D Kitch on every social media. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever the new one is, Threads. I'm also on TikTok, at Coach D Kitch. And then our business website is edgeleadershipacademy.com.
Okay, cool. I'll make sure those get into the show notes and the YouTube description so people don't have to write it down. But thanks so much for being on here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been really enlightening, actually.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to do these and connect with like-minded people. So, if there's ever anything I can do to help you out, please don't hesitate.
Appreciate it. Same back to you. But thanks for tuning in to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. We hope you had a great time with us, learning everything you need to know to stay ahead of the technology curve. Remember to be curious, be updated on all the latest trends, and show them who's the boss. Until next time, we'll be back with plenty more techie tips and tricks so you can stay on top of your game.